Puerto Rico. What is it? A nation, a territory, or a colony? Puerto Rico was a Spanish colony since the 16th century. In 1897, Puerto Rico gained an autonomic charter from Spain, granting its people total autonomy. This autonomy was short-lived when the United States took Puerto Rico after defeating Spain in the Spanish-American War of 1898. After Puerto Rico became a U.S. territory, political conflicts about the island's status would soon emerge, with people fighting for political representation in their own government. This would lead to a historic change in Puerto Rico's status and the formation of an autonomous government under U.S. control. Conflicts soon began after the island became part of the U.S., since some people felt that they were underrepresented in their government. The first action by the U.S. was to form a military government, followed by a civil government under the Foraker Act of 1900. Superseding this act was the Jones Act of 1917, which granted Puerto Ricans U.S. citizenship, established a Senate, a Bill of Rights, and an elected resident commissioner.
Puerto Ricans didn't have basically no participation in the decisions that were made in Puerto Rico. As a matter of fact, the governor of the island was appointed by the President of the United States and was confirmed by Congress.
Even with all this, many Puerto Ricans felt underrepresented because they were not allowed to vote for their own governor. As a result, several political groups had differing ideas about the status of the territory. The transition of power from a Spanish colony to a U.S. territory caused multiple factions advocating for different ideals to rise. Advocating for statehood was the American Federal Party and the Puerto Rican Republican Party. Advocating for independence was the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico, led by Pedro Albizu Campos.
Don Pedro comienza a convertirse en una figura visible cuando dirige la huelga en los obreros de la caña. Y es entonces que comienza ese vínculo entre el sistema de injusticia social y de opresión colonizadora.
Another advocate for independence was the Liberal Party, of which Luis Muñoz Marín was a part of. They believed that Puerto Ricans should be able to govern themselves without any outside influence. However, in 1938, Luis Muñoz Marín formed a new party, the Popular Democratic Party, which supported independence but would give up that idea to focus on social and economic development. As a result of the economic crisis created by the Great Depression, nationalist sentiment rose during the 1930s. The crisis revealed that the U.S. was not being responsible for the island's needs and that the island was too dependent on the U.S. Throughout the economic crisis of the 30s, Pedro Albizu Campos became radical, calling for independence by any means necessary. Violence erupted in 1935, with university students and the police clashing, resulting in 4 nationalists killed. Nationalists were persecuted and Albizu was imprisoned in 1936. Nevertheless, the nationalists continued to be active by planning a march in Ponce in 1937. The police used excessive force during this event, which led to 119 casualties. Nationalists continued to be active years later. On October 30th, 1950, the Nationalists revolted against the U.S. government rule on the island. The revolt took place in various towns. In response, Governor Muñoz mobilized the Puerto Rico National Guard to stop the uprisings.
Estando ya vencidos, desarmados, se les lleva a punta de rifle por la calle principal de Utuado y se les masacra.
The Nationalists sacrificed themselves in order to bring light to Puerto Rico's colonial status. This was successful to an extent, since the fights and protests calling for more government representation led to a political compromise that enacted laws to create a more autonomous state. During World War II, there was an international call for self-determination. The Atlantic Charter between Britain and the U.S. is an example of this. It urged all countries to end colonialism and push for self-determination. This pressed the United States to change Puerto Rico's territorial status towards a more autonomous state. As a result, a compromise started to take place between the U.S. and the government of Puerto Rico, with Act 362 in 1947 by Congress. The act allowed for the election of a governor by the people.
He was then the first governor elected by the Puerto Ricans, the first Puerto Rican governor to be elected by the Puerto Ricans. Before Muñoz, though, the President of the United States nominated a name, Piñeiro, Jesus Piñeiro, to be the first Puerto Rican governor, but Piñeiro wasn't elected.
Furthermore, in June of 1950, Congress passed the Puerto Rico Federal Relations Act, or Public Law 600. The referendum to approve Law 600 took place on June 1951, and it was approved by 76.5% of the voters. The Puerto Rican Senate endorsed the creation of a constitution with a Senate resolution. After the Constitution was approved by the Puerto Rico Constitutional Convention, it was put to a vote in the U.S. Senate where it was accepted. In 1951, the Popular Democratic Party formed a new plan of status called the Estado Libre Asociado, or Commonwealth, that would give Puerto Rico the right to govern itself, elect its own governor, maintain United States citizenship, and receive federal aid with the island remaining under federal control. The revised constitution was approved by the Constitutional Convention, and a referendum for approving it was held. In the referendum, 81.9% of the voters approved the new constitution. President Harry Truman approved the Puerto Rico Constitution by signing Public Law 947 in July of 1952. The U.S. informed the United Nations on the 25th of July, 1953, about the enactment of the Constitution of Puerto Rico. However, there were political segments that were not satisfied.
La realidad es que no resolvió y no ha resuelto, y hoy lo palpamos mucho más cuando vemos las diferencias entre lo que son recursos económicos que se le asignan en igualdad a cualquier estado, pero a Puerto Rico se le dan en restricción, se le dan en desigualdad.
Although the Commonwealth was established, there was still opposition by the pro-independence and pro-statehood political alignments, since they felt that the Commonwealth did not solve the colonial status of the island. The creation of the Commonwealth had tremendous effects in all aspects of Puerto Rican life. Muñoz Marín emphasized the Commonwealth as a way to liberate itself from colonialism and nationalism, believing it would be the key to cultural and economic development on the island. Supporters of this political status believe that it allows Puerto Ricans to maintain their culture as well as be loyal to the U.S., but opponents disagree. Although political representation was expanded, the conflict over Puerto Rico's status continues. The people of the island are divided in three factions. The Popular Democratic Party, with almost 45% support of the population, advocates for the Commonwealth because maintaining a relationship with the United States betters its living conditions while retaining the benefits received as a territory and preserving Puerto Rican culture. The New Progressive Party, followed by around 45% of the people, supports statehood because unifying with the U.S. increases political representation and federal economic assistance. The Puerto Rican Independence Party, with approximately 5% of the people's support, advocates for full separation from the U.S. to preserve national identity. They also believe that the current political status only deteriorates the economy and society with its tight controls. The political divisions on the island make it difficult to solve the political status once and for all. This is especially challenging when the two major parties share almost equal support of the population. Thus, the debate continues today. 5 political status referendums have been held since the formation of the Commonwealth to decide over the future of Puerto Rico's territorial status. These, however, have not been availed by Congress because political factions in the island have difficulty compromising over the status options that will appear on the ballot, and the topic is not a priority for the U.S. After the Commonwealth was formed, Puerto Rico changed in various ways. The island transformed its economy from agricultural to industrial, improving its living standard because of Operation Bootstrap, which exempted business industries that were established on the island from taxes, subsidized infrastructure, and opened the market for products from Puerto Rico to be sent to the United States. However, some negative aspects continue due to its economic dependence. The island cannot trade directly with other countries as a result of the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. Ships to and from Puerto Rico must stop at a U.S. dock before it can be exported and or imported, thus increasing the prices of products. Politically, the island also changed. The new status allowed Puerto Rico to form a constitution with the power to decide on issues at the local level, but the United States is still in control of the island. Many economic policies in the last 20 years, such as the removal of tax exemptions to industries, have contributed to its decline. Recently, the passage of PROMESA has established a fiscal control board to oversee the government's financial policies due to the government's inability to manage its financial debt. This bill prevails over any provision of territory law, state law, or regulation that is inconsistent with this bill.
Tiene un impacto sumamente fuerte, y más fuerte porque los miembros de la Junta están tratando de abrogarse poderes que no le confiere la ley PROMESA.
Members of the Puerto Rican political scene are opposed to its implementation. The board's implementation has caused much controversy because many have blamed it for overextending the powers of the leaders and introducing a dictatorial-like role in Puerto Rican politics. Others say that the implementation of the board has been a protective measure by the U.S. to ensure fiscal responsibility. The board is one example of the Commonwealth's limitations, demonstrating that the current political status failed in granting the long promise of self-rule. Puerto Rico's acquisition as a United States territory after the Spanish-American War sparked a period of political turmoil. Decades of conflict between political factions in Puerto Rico exemplified the need for a defined political status. This led to the establishment of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, as a result of a compromise between the United States and the government of the island led by Governor Luis Muñoz Marín. In doing so, he was able to maintain a relationship with the United States while establishing an autonomous government, much to the disappointment of other political factions on the island, for they felt that self-rule was not fully accomplished. The Commonwealth of today stands as a testament of how compromises occasionally fail at resolving the conflict they initially meant to solve.